Welcome back to Time by the Tent podcast. I'm Joey Baird.
I'm Holly Baird.
And we appreciate you tuning in, downloading the program, watching us on YouTube. Holly, let's go to the hotline and bring in our guest for this week.
Samantha is the host and founder of Lone Crow Adventures YouTube channel. Her channel is dedicated to camping, hiking, backpacking, and outdoor adventures. If you're into gear reviews, camping tips, secret hack, and outdoor adventures, Lone Crow Adventures YouTube channel is the right place. Videos are posted weekly. Welcome to Time by the Tent.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for joining us and the information you're about to share with all of us. I will start with this. How did you get into camping? Was it something that you've always done or you found it later on?
Well, kind of a combination answer. When I was a kid, we used to do a lot of fishing, and my mom was not a tent person.
Okay.
So between my mom and my dad, they found the happy medium of renting these rustic cabins, and they were really rustic. They had some running water, because that was mom's kind of minimum standard, but they were pretty dilapidated little cabins. And we had campfires, and it was a whole family thing where, you know, my uncles would come and my cousins, and that's really kind of my first outdoor experience. And mom always refused to go tent camping. And it wasn't actually until, I would say 2005, and my dad had since passed away, and we had not been on any kind of these cabin adventures for years and years and years. And I finally convinced my mom as I was an adult. I said, I want to go tent camping. Why don't you come with me? And her and I went on our very first tent camping adventure. And it was just something that kind of it lit a spark in me. It was definitely a piece of my life that I had been missing for my whole life up until that point.
Wow.
And now doesn't your mom appear in some of your videos? Am I wrong about this?
Oh, no. Yes, she has,
Okay.
She's gotten into the hiking a little bit. That's been the latest adventure for her, is doing some, she hasn't done any overnight backpacking trips. I don't know if we'll get that far, but definitely some pretty serious day hikes, for somebody that doesn't hike. They're pretty serious anyway.
Fantastic. So you made a video in the past year called 25 Mistakes Every New Camper Makes That Will Ruin Trips. What are your top 3 to 5?
I think the biggest mistake that most brand new campers make, and actually I didn't even include this in the video and I thought about it after the fact, is not really understanding the importance of having an air pad or some type of sleeping mat when you go camping. I know when I first got into camping, I kind of thought that a sleeping pad was more for comfort than anything. So I was pretty broke. I was a college kid, so I just went to the dollar store and I bought one of those blow-up pool mats, and I slept on that, and it was horribly uncomfortable. And, I was born and raised in Canada, so even in the middle of July, it was really, really cold. And I didn't understand that you needed to have a camping mat that had a specific R value for insulation for the environment that you're camping in. So I see a lot of new campers make that mistake where they'll just bring some blankets or something like that, just thinking they need a little bit of padding against the ground, and not realizing that it's not really as much about comfort as it is about insulating the ground from seeping the heat out of your body. So that's probably the biggest one. The mistake that I see a lot of new campers make as well is just around the area of fire, just not really understanding the tools that they need to bring with them to make a fire, understanding that you can't just go to the camp store and buy these huge logs and then put them on the fire and expect them to burn, and also not preparing for the event that you have a hard time getting a fire going, that maybe you should have some kind of a propane or a butane stove to help you cook, just in case the climate's not going to go in your favor, or if the wood's not going to burn well, you have some other way to make your dinner. So those are the primary mistakes that I see.
Well, I think some of the it's more of a sticker shock than anything is the price of wood in some of these camp locations year to year, how much they've increased. It's like 4 pieces, or, like 6 pieces for $8 now. I think we're up to some crazy number like that. That's outrageous.
Yes. And a lot of people, we're all on budgets in 2023, right? The, wallet's gotten a little smaller. And I do see a lot of people where they show up to the campground and they think, I'm just going to scavenge around in the woods and try to find, some wood. And some places do permit you to do that. But a lot of times, by the time that you get to prime camping season, it's so overpicked that you actually can't find enough wood. So
in some places it's a no-no, and they will make sure that it's a no-no to do that.
Absolutely. Yes, so the game wardens, they'll come around and they'll tell you, hey, you got to put that stick back in the woods. That's a natural part of the ecosystem. There are many tents that one can pick from. Just like many meals that you can choose to eat at dinner at camp. The wrong tent can ruin your weekend or possibly in your camping career because you're done with it. What are a few things to look for in tents that one should avoid? Well, I would say the best thing to look for is the rain fly. My personal preference is what I call a peak to ground rain fly, where there's a zipper that goes almost all the way to the top of the tent, and that zipper on the rain fly comes almost all the way to the ground, so that way you're going to get really good rain protection there. A lot of tents, especially larger tents, because families, I find, especially if you've got a couple little kids, you want to buy this big, huge tent because, the kids have all their stuff with them, and, you want to get, sometimes I see even families of 4 getting a 10 or a 12-person tent. That tent is a huge pain in the butt to try to set up. It's humongous. You definitely need 2 people to get it set up, and it doesn't really handle the wind really very well because there's so much surface area that if there's any wind and a storm or even a light rain happens to blow through, there's a huge chance that the rain fly is going to be disrupted by the weather and you're going to end up having leaks. And most people don't actually need as much space inside their tent as what they think they do. So I would recommend people, with families, that maybe they go and get a tent that's like 70% of the size they think they actually need. Because kids actually don't really take up that much space because, everybody's got their gear, but, they don't need all the things that you think you need inside your tent. So that way you can focus on getting maybe a better quality tent that's a little bit smaller instead of spending the same amount of money on a larger tent that is not necessarily the same quality.
Right, and a lot of times, especially as the kids get a little bit older, they are going to typically want their own tent. I know
sure.
I experienced that as a child camping, and people we've interviewed and other families that I know, at some point, your kids might stay in the tent with you, but then they'll want their own tent. So having a tent that might fit 2 adults and 2 small children would at one point be sufficient for 2 adults still, and then the kids would have their own tent too. So yeah.
And you talk about sleeping on the ground. Do you ever use a cot, or is that just an additional weight that you don't feel is necessary when camping?
Well, that really depends on the type of camping that I'm doing. So, if it's just myself, if I'm going out for 1 or 2 nights, I'll typically just sleep in a smaller tent on a mat on the ground. If I'm going to be camping for, let's say I'm going to be doing more of like a base camp. Like, for instance, I'm going to be going to Virginia this fall to the Shenandoah National Forest, and we have a campground booked there. We've got a site for 5 nights. So I'm going to be bringing one of my larger tents, and I'm going to be using a cot because I'm going to be stationary that whole time, and I'm using that campground more as a central location and then going out on day trips. So when I get back from, driving around and seeing the sights and hiking around and seeing the sights, it makes it a lot easier for an extended stay to have a cot that you can sit on the edge of to get dressed and, just not have to crawl around on the ground for, 5 days straight. Because I know myself, I'm not getting any younger, so the cot's definitely a nice thing. But if it's just a weekend thing, I'm just going to bring a mat and sleep on the ground. If it's just a couple days, I'm still young enough to tough it out.
That definitely makes sense. So when camping on public or private land, weather, can be an unpredictable factor. What advice can you offer if a person or family is caught in a pop-up storm when camping in a tent? What to do, what not to do if the storm is going to pass? That might be different versus a whole entire night of extreme conditions.
Well, if it's a pop-up storm that kind of comes up during the day, if you can get inside of your tent and you feel safe, that's the real thing. As soon as you start to question your own personal safety or your family's safety, at that point, the best bet is to try to get to your vehicle if you have a vehicle with you. If not, the next best option, like especially if the winds really start kicking up, the next best option is to go and try to find some kind of a structure, whether it's a bathroom structure. Sometimes campgrounds will have even like picnic lean-tos. That's just going to give you a little bit more protection in case trees fall. I know I spent a pretty terrifying night. It was actually in Flambeau River State Forest, and a storm whipped up in the middle of the night, and the wind was absolutely outrageous. And I was sleeping in my tent, and I had my wife, who I'm now married to, but we weren't together at the time. She was in another tent. And I remember thinking, oh my God, one of us, we're going to wake up. There's going to be a tree crushing one of us. I can't see what's going on in this other tent. I hope I'm not going to get crushed. We didn't have, any shelter available at the time. And it was absolutely terrifying. So, if that happens, the best scenario is to try to get yourself to some location where you're going to be safe, because that tent, with trees falling, there's going to be some injuries if it lands on top of you. Now, if you're preparing to go into the evening, and you know that there is a hellacious storm coming overnight, I have done some additional measures for waterproofing, knowing that, maybe we're going to get, let's say, an inch an hour of rain from 12 till 2 a.m. I will actually bring an additional tarp, and I will put that over the top of my tent. And on the grommets of that tarp, I will use guy rope, and I will actually secure that to the ground, maybe 3 or 4 inches above the ground, so that the wind can't get up underneath there either, just to give the tent a little bit more waterproofness, but also to apply some tension to the tent in case it gets windy, so that the actual structure of the tent doesn't get damaged as well. But, if it starts to get dicey, get to the car, get to a building. I know tents are expensive, but ultimately they can be replaced. Lives cannot, and injuries, you don't want to go down that road either.
And I'm going to guess, and I don't know, on state parks, they probably have some type of plan implemented where they have a shelter in which if bad things happen, you're supposed to go there until the duration of the storm is over.
Yes. And in fact, this is really, really common down south. I was actually at a campground in Oklahoma. I think it was Great Salt Plains or Great Salt Lake Plains, something like that. Anyway, they actually it was an underground bunker that you would go to for tornado, because the alarms would go off, and then you'd run to the tornado shelter that was underground. And in this underground bunker, it would probably house maybe 30, 40 people. It was pretty big, and it was left open all the time. And there were benches on both sides of it, and there was a crate that was left open that you could access that actually had military rations in it in case you got stuck there for a couple of days. It was one of the most wild things I've ever seen. But Carrie Underwood said it best. Oklahoma is known for their tornadoes.
Yeah, it would ruin a weekend of camping for certain.
Yeah.
You've tested a number of products on your channel, and we also all about buying once and buying right. Of all the products you've used, what is your favorite one, hands down? And then what are some products that you tested that you're like, I don't advise people to buy this, even though people may think it's good?
So my very favorite thing that I own is actually a thing for winter camping. It is a little oven. It's called a pipe oven, and it's intended to go between 2 pieces of stovepipe for a tent that has a wood stove in it for the winter. And you can just cook all kinds of delicious little things in there. Cinnamon rolls. I've made cornbread. You can even bake chicken in there, like little Cornish hens or something like that. All kinds of things that you can bake in there. And I really like to cook when I'm camping, so I get really creative. So that's my absolute very favorite camping item. If I had to pick a summer camping item that was my favorite, I would probably say that right now it would probably be my GSI Outdoors 6-cup percolator. Because, and that's another really simple thing. It's a kitchen item. But this little percolator has been with me across the country, for years, and it makes a great cup of coffee. So, I really, really like that. I know it sounds kind of boring, right? A percolator in an oven. But, that's the biggest thing that I enjoy when I'm camping. I like to cook. The things that I would tell people to avoid, the most negative experiences that I've ever had with gear tend to evolve around this theme of pop-up instant tents. I've tried a couple different ones, and they tend to get a lot of condensation. They don't tend to really hold up to weather at all. They tend to leak. And there's also been some kind of quality control manufacturer kind of defects with a few different models that I've tested. So, other than throwing a tent in the backyard for the kids to camp out, on a sleepover or something, I would really advise people stay away from the instant pop-up tents. Go with a dome tent. If you're new to camping, go with a dome tent because it's the most versatile tent. You'll probably be the happiest with it.
And do you, with all your hiking and camping, do you take a GPS, SOS radio? I don't know that Garmin has one. Garmin has one where you can SOS and relay information if you don't have cell service?
Absolutely, yes. We use the Garmin InReach. I have the full-size version, and I will actually activate that for trips. So if I'm going for, a period of time, let's say I'm going for 4 or 5 months in the wintertime where I'm not going anywhere that's really off-grid, I will actually turn that off so that I don't have to pay that monthly fee, and then I'll turn it back on again when we go on backpacking trips. But when we go, especially when we're going places that are remote, like I've done some canoe trips in Voyageurs National Park. There is no cell service in the park, and most of the campsites there are just these little islands, and you can go days without seeing another person. If you were to get injured out there, it would be a really, really serious situation. And the other thing, too, that you have to think about, because, my wife and I, we typically camp just the two of us. We don't really bring friends with us. Sometimes we bring family, but that's usually pretty close to home. The most dangerous animal that you will ever encounter on trail or at a campground is another person. So 2 women camping alone, can be an easy target for would-be predators. So I like having the Garmin InReach just in case there was ever a situation where an unfriendly person came around. At least we would be able to send a text message in the absence of having cell phone signal to a family member to say, hey, you need to call the police, this, like a real short message, to get some help that way. So it's just a little bit of comfort. I've never had to use it. But one thing that I do recommend is that if you're going on a really, really extreme trip, like let's say, you're a middle-aged person, and you're kind of out of shape, and you're maybe planning on doing like a rim-to-rim hike of the Grand Canyon or something that is probably really above your physical level, it might not be a bad idea for that trip to upgrade your plan from whatever the basic plan that you're paying for to the more expensive plan that's like $75 or $100 a month or something, that covers rescues. Mm-hmm. Because if you hit that SOS button and you don't have rescue coverage, that's about, depending on the extent of the rescue, that's like a $20,000 mistake. Because your health insurance isn't going to cover you to be airlifted out of somewhere. So if you're going somewhere doing something crazy, pay the extra money and get the extra protection just in case.
Yeah, have it and never in the tensions of never needing it rather than never having it and bad things happen.
Exactly. Yep.
and glad that you've not had to use it or been in a position where you felt you needed to use it. And we hope that that continues for you and your wife there as you journey on throughout the country.
You know what's interesting is Joey and I watch camping videos, and I always tell him that I really enjoy these hammock camping videos from these men who have the security that can go out and just hammock camp by themselves at night and probably not have to worry about their own safety. And so I really appreciate you bringing up the fact that, like, yes, there are things where we have to worry. I know, like, I hike solo, and it's something that's always in the back of my mind that I am putting myself in a vulnerable position anytime I do go hiking solo. And I think it's good to recognize that there's a certain amount of privilege for those people that can go backpacking or whatever solo and not necessarily have to always have that in the back of their mind.
I think, for most women, if you get that feeling, and we all know that feeling, if there's any women listening to that podcast, you know that feeling, the creepy guy feeling or the bad situation feeling. The minute that you get that feeling, you need to get yourself out of that situation. Sarah and I had a situation a couple years ago where we had been hiking, and we just got all of our stove and everything out. We were just getting ready to start to make something to eat, and there was this group of rowdy guys that we noticed in the distance. They were kind of up on the bluff in the distance, and you could see that they had a bunch of beer and they were drinking and they were rowdy. And I thought, we need to go. We need to go now before they see us, because something bad's going to happen. There's 8 guys up there, and they've all been drinking, and they can hardly stand up, and this is not safe for us, and we need to get out of there. And, fortunately, nothing happened, and I don't know if anything would have, but it's that intuition, rely on that, because, your instincts generally will serve you best in those situations, not just at camping, but in everyday life, too.
Now, in your adventures, do you take any self-protection measures? I know Holly has recently purchased a stun gun for her hiking. Do you take any bear spray or anything like that in order to, in the instance that you have to cause somebody to back away, you can use it?
I do not. Like, if I am hiking in grizzly country, I will carry bear spray. Or if I am going to be hiking in areas where there's a dense black bear population, I will carry some bear spray. I don't feel the need to carry any kind of defense against another person. I guess I'm just relying on my own instincts and, just hoping that kind of thing doesn't happen. I wouldn't really feel comfortable carrying a weapon with me with the intention I might have to use it against another person, Right. That's, I don't like to think that the world is that mean. I'd rather just be vigilant and take myself away from situations as they arise. But you never know. The world's full of weirdos. You can meet anybody, anywhere, any day.
Right. Steve Wallace, the famous YouTuber, he says, I've got the bear spray for the 4-legged animals and the 2-legged if I need to.
Yeah. I mean, I guess worst case scenario, I've got my trekking poles. I'll come at you with that.
Definitely. So we've really enjoyed having you on the program. How can our listeners find out more about you and your videos?
Well, if they head over to lonecrowadventures.com, that is going to redirect you right to the YouTube channel. Or, of course, you can just search Lone Crow Adventures in YouTube. That will bring you to the YouTube channel. We also have a little Facebook page where, I'll just post some random pictures of things that we're doing and, different ideas and stuff I have. If you guys want to follow me on there, you can search on Facebook, Lone Crow Adventures. We'd love to have you guys join the Crow's Nest. We're a growing community, and we all love camping, hiking, and backpacking.
Well, Samantha, we thank you for your time and the information you've provided us. For not only Holly and myself, but all of our listeners.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. Anytime.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.